He's a senior research fellow at the independent think tank Africa Dialogues. Thembisa, tell us a little bit more about Eswatini and about King Mswati III. How is he seen there?
Well, it's an interesting time, but I think it's going to be. These are not really serious elections because those that are going to be elected are mainly going to form the advisory body of the King Mswati, who happens to be the last absolute monarch in Africa. So there isn't much enthusiasm in Eswatini because nothing is going to change with these elections.
And I mean, you say they're not very serious elections. So what do we expect turnout to be then?
Well, you have about 580,000 or so registered voters. So it's not expected to have a large turnout because, as I said, people don't expect much change from these elections. So you are going to have a turnout which is not going to be as expected. I know the Swazi government expect that it's going to be a large turnout, but based on reports coming from Eswatini and all the civil society, they're saying that they don't expect much to be coming out of this.
Okay, and the country has huge unemployment. You say that people don't always have that much hope that things will change. What's being done to address that, and how do you think that will affect the election?
Well, and as long as you have this absolute monarchy that is not really servicing its own people or taking care of its own people's demands, particularly on issues of employment, you are likely not to have any change. So these are just, elections that were supposed to happen. But the majority of the Swazi people, both inside Swaziland and diaspora, particularly in South Africa, do not expect that much will happen out of this because, the king has not changed its ways in terms of governance and its style of governance. So it's going to be the same old, at least according to many observers and civil society organizations.
And are there any outside observers monitoring these elections, or are they going on behind closed doors, as it were?
Well, there are observers, but the only observer which I think can be taken serious is the Southern African Development Community Observer, which is SADC, the same observer delegation that observed in Zimbabwe not long ago. And they came up with quite a report in terms of, a damning report in terms of the freeness of the elections and the elections making democratic elections in Zimbabwe. So one hopes, of course, that this time around they're going to come up with similar reports, because certainly there was no open campaigning, no voters' education, and all those other pillars which deem an election of this kind democratic. It didn't happen in Eswatini. So one hopes, of course, that the report is going to be similar to what we saw in Zimbabwe.
Now, Eswatini, the only absolute monarchy in Africa, what do its neighbours make of it?
Well, it's the only absolute monarch. In fact, it's interesting to see what's happening, particularly in West Africa, where there's been coups. I mean, now the Africans are talking about good coups and bad coups. Good coups gaining a lot of traction.